I stood frozen in the rain outside my grandmother's funeral, watching as the security guard physically dragged me away from her grave while 200 elite guests looked on in silence. My stepmother Patricia's voice cut through the downpour like a knife. "You don't belong here. Don't stain this sacred place with your poverty." Marcus, my stepbrother, ripped the cheap white roses from my trembling hands and threw them into the mud, grinding them under his Italian leather shoes. Victoria was filming everything on her phone, her perfectly manicured finger hovering over the Go Live button on Instagram. The humiliation burned hotter than any physical pain I'd ever felt. But what they didn't know, what none of them could possibly imagine as they sneered at my thrift store black dress and scuffed shoes, was that I owned everything. The mansion they slept in, the cars they drove, the very ground beneath their feet, and in exactly 72 hours, I was going to destroy them all. If you're loving this story of ultimate revenge, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because you won't believe what happens next. Drop a comment telling me what you would do in this situation. Now let me take you back to where this all began. 6 months earlier, I was sitting in my tiny studio apartment grading papers when my phone rang. It was my grandmother's private number, the one only I had. Her voice was weak but urgent. "Elizabeth, darling, I need you to come to the mansion tonight. Alone. Don't tell Patricia or the others." There was something in her tone that made my blood run cold. I'd been banned from family gatherings for 3 years at that point, ever since Patricia convinced everyone I was trying to manipulate my grandmother for money. The truth was, I'd been supporting myself since college, working 2 jobs, while building my tech company in secret. I arrived at the Morgan estate after dark, using the old servants' entrance my grandmother had told me about. She was waiting in her private study, looking smaller and frailer than I remembered. "Sit down, my dear. We need to talk about your future and theirs." She gestured weakly toward the main house, where Patricia's laughter echoed through the halls. My grandmother had discovered everything. Patricia's gambling debts over $3 million owed to underground casinos, Marcus's fake degree from Harvard purchased from a diploma mill, and his involvement in a securities fraud scheme that was about to explode. Victoria's social media empire built on bullying and sponsored posts for pyramid schemes. "I've made a terrible mistake," my grandmother said, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "I let that woman into our home. I let her poison your father's memory. I let her turn your siblings against you. She wasn't my real grandmother by blood, but she'd loved me more than anyone in that house ever had. I'm dying, Elizabeth. The doctors give me 3 months, and I'm going to make this right." That night, she transferred everything to me. The Morgan estate, worth $85 million, the investment portfolio, the controlling shares in Morgan Industries, all of it. "But we have to be smart about this," she warned. "If Patricia knows, she'll contest it, tie it up in courts for years. She might even try to hurt you." So we created a plan. I would continue my life as a struggling teacher. My grandmother would pretend the will was still being finalized. And when the time came, we'd reveal the truth in a way that would leave Patricia no room to maneuver. My grandmother made me promise one thing: don't let them break you again. And when you take what's yours, make sure they understand exactly who you are. She died 6 weeks later, but not before she'd recorded everything. Video testimonies about Patricia's manipulation, audio recordings of Marcus threatening her, screenshots of Victoria's cruel messages, all of it documented, time-stamped, and backed up on servers that Patricia couldn't touch. The day of the funeral was Patricia's masterpiece of cruelty. She'd planned it like a society event, inviting everyone who mattered in our city. The mayor, business leaders, old money families. She wanted to showcase her position as the new matriarch of the Morgan family. When I showed up uninvited, according to her, she saw an opportunity to humiliate me one final time. The security guard who grabbed my arm was someone I recognized from my childhood. His name was Robert, and he used to sneak me cookies when I was little. "I'm sorry, Miss Elizabeth," he whispered as he pulled me toward the gate. "I got bills to pay." I didn't resist. I let them throw me out. I let Victoria's live stream reach 50,000 viewers. I let Marcus crush my flowers and Patricia deliver her cutting remarks. Because I knew something they didn't. The next day was the will reading. I wasn't invited to that either. I stood in the hallway of what was legally my house, listening to Patricia's confident voice through the mahogany doors. Of course she left everything to us. We were her real family. That girl was always an outsider. I heard Marcus agree. Finally, we can sell this old place and move somewhere actually modern. Maybe the Hamptons. Victoria was already planning her Instagram announcement about inheriting millions. I let them dream for exactly 15 minutes. Then I activated the smart home system that I'd had installed 2 weeks earlier, replacing all the old equipment under the guise of upgrades my grandmother wanted. My voice came through every speaker in that library, calm and cold. Take your hand off Mr. Sullivan Marcus. He's my lawyer now, not yours. The doors unlocked with a soft click. I walked in wearing a Tom Ford suit that cost more than Patricia's monthly allowance. Behind me came James Sterling, my personal attorney, who specialized in hostile corporate takeovers, and 4 armed security professionals from a private military company. The look on their faces was worth every moment of suffering I'd endured. Patricia's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the antique rug. Marcus lunged at me, actually tried to put his hands on me, and my security had him face down on the floor in under 3 seconds. One knee pressed between his shoulder blades, his arm twisted at an angle that made him whimper. "Get off me," he gasped. "You can't do this. This is our house." I walked past him like he was furniture and sat in my grandmother's chair at the head of the table. The leather was still warm from Patricia's body. "No, Marcus, this is my house. It's been my house for 6 months. The will Mr. Sullivan was about to read, it's not a will. It's a deed of sale fully executed and recorded with the county. My grandmother sold me everything for $1 6 months ago. Every asset, every account, every share of stock. You're not inheriting anything because there's nothing left to inherit." Patricia's face went from pale to purple. "That's impossible. She wouldn't. She couldn't. She wasn't in her right mind." James Sterling opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents, thick enough to stop a bullet. Mrs. Morgan underwent extensive psychiatric evaluation before the sale. 3 independent doctors certified her mental competence. We have video testimony recorded over several weeks, showing her explaining her reasoning in detail. We also have documentation of your financial abuse, including the forged checks and the $3.2 million you embezzled from her personal accounts for your gambling addiction. The room went silent, except for Marcus's labored breathing against the floor. Victoria was crying, mascara running down her face in black rivers. But she still had her phone out, still recording, always performing. "You want to post that, Victoria?" I asked. "Go ahead. Let your followers watch what happens when you bully the wrong person. Let them see what a fraud looks like." I turned to Patricia, who was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles had gone white. "You have until 5 p.m. today to remove yourselves and your belongings from my property. Anything left behind will be disposed of. Mr. Sterling has prepared trespassing charges if you're still here at 5:01. Patricia found her voice shrill and desperate. "You can't throw us out. We have rights. We'll fight this. We'll take you to court and destroy you." I smiled, and I knew it didn't reach my eyes. "Please do. I'd love to see you explain to a judge how you tried to manipulate a dying woman, how you isolated her from her granddaughter, how you stole from her while she was dying of cancer. We have everything, Patricia. Every text message you thought you deleted, every phone call, every threat." She tried a different approach, her voice turning sweet and pleading. "Elizabeth, honey, we're family. Your grandmother wouldn't want us to fight like this. She'd want us to work together, to share what she left behind." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. This was the same woman who'd told me I wasn't family 3 days ago. The same woman who'd had me barred from visiting my grandmother in her final weeks. "Family," I repeated softly. "You mean like how you were family when you told the hospital I wasn't allowed in her room, when you spread rumors that I was trying to poison her for her money, when you turned my own father's memory against me." I stood up and walked to the window overlooking the gardens my grandmother had loved. The roses were blooming red and white just like she'd planned. "You're not my family. You're parasites who fed on a lonely old woman's kindness. And now you're going to learn what happens when the host removes the parasites." I turned back to face them. "Security will escort you out. You have your 5 hours. Use them wisely." But Patricia wasn't done. She never went down without a fight, and I'd underestimated her desperation. Over the next week, she launched a media campaign that would have impressed a political operative. She went to every newspaper, every TV station, every blog that would listen. "Elderly woman defrauded by calculating granddaughter." The headlines screamed, "Tech mogul stole fortune from dying grandmother." She painted herself as the protective daughter-in-law who tried to save my grandmother from my manipulation. Victoria weaponized her social media following 2 million Instagram users who believed everything she posted. She created a hashtag, Justice for Grandma Morgan, and it was trending within hours. She posted doctored photos of me photoshopped into expensive cars and designer stores, claiming I'd been living a secret life of luxury while pretending to be poor. The comments were vicious. Death threats flooded my email. Someone found the address of the school where I'd been teaching and vandalized my classroom. Marcus took the most direct approach. He hired gang members to smash my car windows and leave a dead rat on my doorstep with a note, "Give it back or you're next." He filed a lawsuit claiming undue influence and forgery, knowing it would tie up the estate in legal proceedings, even if he eventually lost. His lawyer was expensive and aggressive, the kind who didn't care about truth, only about winning. I let them have their moment. I let the media circus build. I let Patricia think she was gaining ground. Because every attack they launched, every lie they told, every threat they made, I was documenting, recording, building my case. And while they were focused on their public relations war, I was activating Protocol Zero. It started small. Patricia was at her favorite luxury spa, the one where she spent thousands of dollars every month on treatments and massages. She handed over her Black American Express card, the one she'd convinced my grandmother to add her to years ago. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Morgan," the receptionist said with a confused smile. "This card has been declined." Patricia laughed it off. "There must be a mistake. Try it again." Declined. She tried her other cards. All declined. I'd frozen every account she had access to, every credit line my grandmother had foolishly extended to her. She had to walk out of that spa in her robe, dripping wet, calling a taxi she couldn't pay for because her wallet was empty. The other clients watched and whispered. Someone took a photo. It was on gossip sites within the hour. Former socialite can't pay spa bill. The humiliation was just beginning. At the mansion where they were staying in a nearby hotel since I'd evicted them, I had the utilities disconnected, all of them. Electric, water, gas, internet. When Patricia called the companies to complain, she discovered the accounts were in my name, and I'd specifically requested disconnection. She screamed at customer service representatives, who politely explained there was nothing they could do. The house they'd been trying to squat in, claiming tenants' rights, became unlivable. No heat in November, no water to flush the toilets, no lights when the sun went down. But the real masterpiece was Marcus. He'd been so proud of his job at Goldman Sachs, the position he'd secured with his fake Harvard MBA. He loved telling people he was an investment banker, loved the prestige and the salary and the expense account. I'd spent 3 weeks investigating his background, hiring private investigators who were very good at their jobs. They found the diploma mill. They found the forged transcripts. They found the securities fraud. He'd been involved in a pump and dump scheme with penny stocks that had cost elderly investors their retirement savings. I compiled everything into a comprehensive dossier and sent it anonymously to his employer, the SEC and the New York Times. On a Wednesday morning, Marcus walked into his office to find security waiting for him. His colleagues watched as he was escorted out with his belongings in a cardboard box. By noon, the Times had published their exposé. Goldman Sachs banker used fake credentials involved in securities fraud. His face was on the front page of the business section. The SEC filed charges the next day. Criminal charges. The kind that came with prison time if convicted. Marcus's lawyer, the expensive one he'd hired to sue me, dropped him immediately when he couldn't pay the retainer. He was facing up to 20 years in federal prison, and he couldn't afford a public defender's attention, much less a proper defense. I watched the news coverage from my office at Morgan Innovations, my tech company that I'd been building in secret for 5 years. We'd just closed our Series C funding at a $2 billion valuation. I was one of the youngest female CEOs in Silicon Valley, and nobody in my family had even known. Victoria's downfall was perhaps the sweetest because it was so public. I'd spent 2 months gathering evidence of every terms of service violation she'd ever committed, the fake followers she'd bought, the undisclosed sponsored posts, the bullying and harassment she'd engaged in, the photos she'd stolen from other creators. I compiled it all and sent it to Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube with detailed documentation. Her accounts were suspended simultaneously across all platforms. 2 million followers gone in an instant. The brands she'd had deals with dropped her immediately. The sponsorships dried up. The free products stopped arriving. But I didn't stop there. I used my connections in the tech industry to make sure she was blacklisted. No platform would verify her. No brand would work with her. She tried to start over with new accounts, but I had algorithms monitoring for her. Every time she built up even a few thousand followers, I'd report the account with evidence of ban evasion. She was erased from the digital world she'd lived in, and without that validation, without those likes and comments and followers, Victoria didn't know who she was. The charity gala was Patricia's last desperate attempt to salvage her reputation. She'd been planning it for over a year before my grandmother died, as a way to cement her status in high society. It was supposed to be her triumphant moment, raising money for children's literacy while networking with the city's elite. She'd already sent the invitations before I evicted her, and she was too proud or too stupid to cancel. She thought she could use the event to rally support, to paint herself as the victim of my cruelty. I let her think she was still in control, right up until the moment I walked through the doors of the Plaza Hotel ballroom. I'd bought the hotel 3 weeks earlier through a shell company. The event Patricia thought she was hosting. It was happening in my building, on my property with my permission. I arrived in a crimson Valentino gown that cost more than the average person's yearly salary diamonds at my throat that had belonged to my great-grandmother. Every head turned when I entered. Patricia was at the podium mid-speech about the importance of education and helping underprivileged children. The irony was apparently lost on her. She saw me and her face went slack with shock. I walked up to the stage, my heels clicking on the marble floor in the sudden silence. "Excuse me," I said pleasantly, taking the microphone from her limp hand. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is my event. I'm the primary sponsor." I nodded to my tech team in the back. The screens behind me, which had been showing heartwarming photos of children reading, went black. Then new footage began to play. Security camera footage from my grandmother's house, the cameras I'd had installed months before she died. The footage showed Patricia and Marcus in the library, their voices clear. "We need to increase her medication," Patricia was saying. "Dr. Chen said the overdose would look natural given her condition." Marcus nodded. "And if the old bat changes the will before then?" Patricia laughed. "She won't. I've made sure Elizabeth can't get near her, and even if she tries something, we'll contest it. We'll claim dementia manipulation, whatever it takes." The ballroom erupted in gasps and horrified murmurs. Patricia tried to grab the microphone back, but my security blocked her path. The footage continued. More conversations. Patricia stealing jewelry and selling it. Marcus forging checks. Victoria reading cruel texts she'd sent me laughing about how pathetic I was. All of it recorded. All of it time-stamped and verified. "You're watching attempted murder," I said into the microphone, my voice steady. "You're watching elder abuse, theft, fraud, and conspiracy. These people aren't victims. They're criminals." The doors at the back of the ballroom opened, and FBI agents walked in. I'd been working with them for 2 months, providing evidence, making statements, building an airtight case. Patricia tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The agents read her rights as they handcuffed her in front of 400 of the city's most influential people. Her makeup was running, her carefully styled hair coming undone, her designer dress rumpled. She looked old and desperate and small. Marcus was arrested at his apartment an hour later. They caught him trying to flee with a suitcase full of cash and a fake passport. The securities fraud charges were just the beginning. Now he was facing conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, and a dozen other charges. His bail was set at $5 million. He couldn't make it. He sat in jail for 3 months waiting for trial. Victoria was picked up the next morning. She wasn't charged with the same crimes as her mother and brother, but she faced her own legal troubles. Cyberbullying charges from the families of teenagers she'd harassed. Fraud charges for the fake sponsored posts. Her lawyer advised her to plead guilty and hope for probation. She was facing 2 years in prison if she went to trial. I watched it all unfold from a distance, running my company, building my empire. Morgan Innovations went public 6 months later. The IPO was the most successful tech offering of the year. I was worth $3.7 billion on paper, but the money had never been the point. The point was showing them who I really was, showing them what they'd underestimated, showing them the cost of their cruelty. Patricia was convicted on all counts. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. She was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for at least 10. I went to the sentencing. I sat in the front row and watched as they led her away in shackles. She looked at me one last time, and I saw something I'd never seen before: understanding. She finally realized who I was, what she'd lost, what she'd thrown away with her greed and her cruelty. Marcus got 20 years. The securities fraud alone would have been enough, but the attempted murder charge sealed his fate. He'd have to serve at least 17 years before he was eligible for parole. He'd be in his 50s when he got out, his entire life wasted. He'd lost everything. His job, his reputation, his freedom. Victoria got 18 months and 3 years probation. She served her time in a minimum security facility, but prison was prison. When she got out, she was a convicted felon. No social media platform would touch her. No employer would hire her. She ended up working retail at a discount store, recognized occasionally by former fans who would whisper and point and laugh. 3 months after the trials ended, I stood on the balcony of the Morgan mansion, looking out over the gardens my grandmother had loved so much. I'd had them completely restored, bringing in the best landscape architects in the country. The roses were blooming again, red and white and yellow, their scent carrying on the evening breeze. The house had been transformed into the headquarters of the Morgan Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to helping young women in STEM fields. We provided scholarships, mentorship, and career support, everything my grandmother would have wanted. The old staff had been rehired at double their previous salaries with full benefits. Robert, the security guard, who'd had to drag me from the funeral, was now head of security. He'd apologized 100 times, but I understood. He'd been following orders, trying to keep his job. The housekeeper, Maria, who'd slipped me food when Patricia tried to starve me out during family visits, was now the estate manager. The gardener who taught me about roses when I was little was training a new generation of horticulturists in my grandmother's gardens. James Sterling found me there, 2 glasses of wine in his hands. He'd become more than my lawyer over the past year. He was my friend, my advisor, my conscience when I needed one. The last of the appeals was denied today, he said, handing me a glass. Patricia's lawyer filed for early release based on her age and health. The judge rejected it. She'll serve her full sentence. I took a sip of wine, letting the information settle. Good. He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the gardens. You know, he said carefully, you could show mercy. You could write letters to the parole board when they're eligible. You could help Victoria get a better job, give her a second chance. You have that power now. I considered his words. There was a time years ago when I would have jumped at the chance to be the bigger person, to show kindness to people who'd shown me none. But that Elizabeth was gone, burned away in the fires of their cruelty. They had their chances, I said finally. Every day they chose to be cruel when they could have been kind. Every day they chose to take when they could have given. Every day they chose to destroy when they could have built. I turned to look at James, at this man, who'd helped me reclaim everything they'd tried to steal. I'm not going to help them. I'm not going to save them from the consequences of their own choices. That's not mercy. That's enabling. They earned every single day they're going to spend in prison or poverty or obscurity. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. What about you? Are you happy? It was a simple question with a complicated answer. I looked around at the empire I'd built, the justice I'd secured, the life I'd created from the ashes of their abuse. I'm satisfied, I said. I'm vindicated. I'm successful. Happy. I paused, considering. I'm getting there. Every day I wake up and I'm not under their thumb is a good day. Every day I build something they can't destroy is a victory. Every day I prove I'm more than they said I was is a triumph. James raised his glass. To Morgan Empire, then, and to the woman who built it. We clinked glasses and drank, watching the sun set over the gardens. In the distance, I could see the lights of the city starting to glow. My city now in a way it had never been before. I had power here. Real power. Not just money or influence, but the power that came from knowing exactly who I was and what I was capable of. The next morning, I had breakfast with a group of scholarship recipients from the Morgan Foundation. Bright young women studying engineering, computer science, mathematics. They reminded me of who I used to be, full of potential and hope before Patricia and Marcus and Victoria had tried to crush it out of me. I told them my story, not the sanitized version that had appeared in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal, but the real one. The humiliation, the abuse, the moment I decided to fight back. The most important thing I learned, I told them as they listened with wide eyes, is that you can't let anyone define your worth. Not your family, not your friends, not society. You define it. You decide what you're capable of. You set the limits of what you'll accept. One of the girls raised her hand. She was shy, maybe 19, with nervous energy. What if they're stronger than you? What if you can't fight back? I smiled at her, remembering every time I'd felt powerless, every moment I'd wanted to give up. Then you get stronger, I said simply. You build your skills, you build your network, you build your resources, you wait for your moment, and then you strike with everything you have. Patience isn't weakness. Strategic retreat isn't surrender. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is survive until you're ready to win. They applauded when I finished, and I saw something in their faces that made the whole journey worthwhile. Hope. Determination. The belief that they could overcome whatever obstacles they faced. As I left the foundation that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Patricia had been transferred to a different facility after an altercation with another inmate. Marcus had been put in solitary confinement for attempting to smuggle contraband. Victoria had been fired from her retail job for showing up late repeatedly. The universe, it seemed, had its own ideas about justice. I deleted the notifications without reading further. They weren't my problem anymore. They weren't my family. They were just people who'd made terrible choices and were living with the consequences. I drove to my office at Morgan Innovations, where my team was waiting with the latest product demo. We were launching a new AI platform that would revolutionize online education, making quality learning accessible to millions of students who couldn't afford traditional schooling. It was the kind of work my grandmother would have been proud of, the kind of legacy that mattered. That evening, I returned to the mansion and walked through the halls where I'd once been made to feel unwelcome. Every room had been transformed, filled with light and purpose, and the sound of people doing meaningful work. The library where Patricia had tried to steal my inheritance was now a reading room where foundation scholars came to study. The dining room where Marcus had mocked my poverty was now a conference center where we held workshops on leadership and entrepreneurship. I climbed the stairs to my grandmother's old bedroom, the one I'd claimed as my own. Her personal effects were still there, the photos and mementos she'd treasured. There was one photo in particular that I kept on my nightstand. It was the two of us in the garden when I was 7, both of us covered in dirt, laughing at something I couldn't remember anymore. She'd loved me when no one else did. She'd believed in me when everyone else had written me off, and she'd given me the tools I needed to fight back. "I did it, Grandma," I whispered to the photo. "I made them pay. I built something beautiful from the ashes of their cruelty. I hope you're proud." I liked to think she was. I liked to think she was somewhere watching, satisfied that justice had been served and that her legacy was in good hands. The Morgan name meant something different now. Not old money and social climbing and bitter family politics. It meant innovation. It meant giving back. It meant second chances for people who'd been counted out. People sometimes ask if I regret being so ruthless. I don't. They chose cruelty at every turn, and when the reckoning came, I made sure the consequences were unforgettable. Some call it revenge. I call it justice. Forgiveness without accountability is just enabling bad behavior, and being the bigger person doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. I built an empire of purpose. Patricia sits in her cell with nothing but regrets. Marcus counts down the years he wasted. Victoria struggles to make ends meet, a cautionary tale about valuing appearance over substance. And me, I wake up every morning in a house filled with meaningful work, running a company that changes lives, knowing I earned everything I have. That's the real victory. I took everything they used to break me and forged it into armor. They thought they were crushing a powerless girl. Instead, they created their own destruction. Never underestimate someone just because they're quiet. Never mistake patience for weakness. The person you're stepping on today might be standing on your neck tomorrow. I'm a person who was hurt and fought back. A person who was counted out and proved everyone wrong. A person who was told I was nothing and built something extraordinary. I sleep well at night, and that's more than they can say. Here's what I want you to take from my story. If you're being mistreated or told you're worthless by people who should love, you know this: you are not powerless. Power can be built, earned, and taken. Document everything. Build your resources. Find your allies. Wait for your moment. Then strike hard, fast, and decisively. And after, build something beautiful from the ruins. Don't let their cruelty define you. The real revenge isn't their suffering, though that's satisfying. The real revenge is your success, your happiness, your triumph over everything they tried to do to you. I am Elizabeth Morgan, exactly who I was always meant to be. They tried to break me and instead forged me into something unbreakable. What they deserve is exactly what they got. Perfect justice. So what about you? Have you ever been underestimated by someone who thought they had all the power? Have you been pushed down by people who should have lifted you up? Are you still waiting for your moment, or have you already taken it? Drop a comment below and share your story. If this resonated with you, smash that like button and subscribe, because there are more stories of triumph coming, more proof that the people who count you out often end up counting the cost of their arrogance. Don't miss what comes next.